Hey, brand builders, ready to take your brand to the next level? I'm Dana Ammons, and welcome to the Brand Blueprint. Welcome to the Brand Blueprint podcast. My name is Dana Ammons, and I am your host of the Brand Blueprint. And today I am thrilled to welcome Devoreaux Walton, founder and managing partner of Relevant. Devoreaux is an expert in diversity marketing, inclusive marketing, and the business case for each, which we are going to talk about today. Through her work and podcast, The Inclusive Consumer, Devoreaux has helped countless brands create meaningful connections and audiences. Devoreaux, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. I am really excited about getting into the conversation today. But before we do that, we have a segment called our rapid fire question and answer segment. And it is designed specifically to allow our audience to get to know you a little bit more on a personal level. So without further ado, if you're ready, we will jump into a little bit of rapid fire.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right, great. All right, so I always start with this one. This is the standard for everybody. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Tea. Now, what kind of tea?
Peppermint or lavender?
Nice. Okay, peppermint. So both are non-caffeine, right?
I don't do caffeine. I actually
so no caffeine.
Caffeine for probably 7 years now, and I'm not going back.
Very nice. Now, so let me ask a follow-up question. Morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
Morning person, naturally.
Naturally. Go to bed early, I rise early, and I jumpstart the day.
I love that. I feel like that is the most productive natural rhythm of things, is to rise early, knock stuff out, go to bed fairly early. I'm on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. For some reason, I've never been able to flip that switch back the opposite way. I'm actually learning. I have a young buddy and client who is a doctor in neuroscience and is teaching me by way of just some of the fantastic methods and things that he's learned in his studies, that you can actually get your circadian rhythms reset and on the right track by just simply starting the morning with a little bit of sun on your face. So who would have known, right? Like 10 minutes of sunlight essentially in the morning will kind of start that rhythm off. And it's likely something that I definitely wasn't doing on a consistent basis. By the time I probably left the house, other than walk the dog in the dark, the day had already started. So, which hence kind of explain why my day kind of slides back into the 10, 11, 12, range before I hit the bed. So continuing rapid fire, tell me a little bit about your travels. What is your favorite city for inspiration, or city that you just like to go to or visit when you take a vacation?
Okay, so my favorite getaway is definitely the Caribbean. I have a goal to go to every single country, and I have quite a bit left on the list.
Yeah.
So my next trip is St. Lucia. I'm really looking forward to it. I absolutely adore the Caribbean, the food, the culture, the weather, especially in my birthday month of December. So the Caribbean is always my favorite place to go.
All right, so very cool. I just caught that. So shout out to you for your birthday month. When exactly are you celebrating, or have you already celebrated?
December 3rd. So Sagittarius Club.
So fellow Sagittarius, I believe. I am November 26th, so I was not too far before you. So we both celebrated birthdays probably within 7 to 10 days of each other. Very cool. Small world as well. I was just having this conversation with somebody about how having birthdays in the November, December timeframe, growing up, at least in my household and in the hood, I think, it was kind of a funny scenario where my mom would always try to get the buy one, get one, so to speak, and be like, hey, well, Christmas is just around the corner. So why don't we just like push, and then you'll get 2 gifts on Christmas, which was, as a kid, hard to discern if you really got 2 gifts or if you really just got the gifts you were going to get for Christmas anyway. Right. So bottom line, I always enjoy talking to people who have late winter birthdays, because I think it's so interesting as it relates to kind of how you went through school. Now, following up that and thinking about kind of your professional career and kind of where you have worked and what brands you have engaged in. Tell me, what is one of your favorite brands, not the brands that you would say that you use or buy as a particular consumer, per se, but a brand you admire from a workplace culture, what you've heard about them, or either you worked there before standpoint?
Yeah, I love this question. Well, I actually do have one brand that really hits on all of those points, and it's American Express.
Ah,
As a
leave home
consumer,
without it.
their customer service is top tier. The
Yeah.
customer experience, it's inclusive. And I've just never had one negative encounter, even when I run into challenges or issues with my card, right? Now, internally, their culture is so interesting. They have a lot of focus on inclusion, and you see that coming through in their website, how
Hmm.
they're promoting their marketing materials, their
Hmm.
advertising. So, American Express for me is definitely a 10 out of 10.
No, great point. Shout out to American Express. They are, I think, one of the more ubiquitous brands that have found a way to permeate in a lot of different cultures and communities without it feeling kind of out of place, right? Like they have kind of figured out a way, whether it's sponsorships, brand partnerships, et cetera. I have seen them over the years do really tasteful, thoughtful things. And they've had really diverse, strong leadership, I think, which has been a credit to them as well. One of my call it corporate idols and leaders for years led that company, and I think they continue to push a lot of strong leadership from a diverse standpoint. So love that answer. So let's one more question before we jump. What is a hidden gem or a piece of advice that you would give founders about connecting with diverse audiences? And when I say that, right, because I'm talking founders in our audience are typically smaller founders, startup founders, and sometimes pre-revenue or pre-concept founders, right? Like they know they want to be a founder. They're going to eventually get their concept or idea out there. They probably haven't, or they're just starting. And so if you think about that, what would you tell a founder that early in the process to think about when it comes to really strong inclusive marketing?
Yeah, I love this question. So, my advice would be to really think strategically about starting up front with your customer segmentation. It's usually a point that we get to at a more mature stage in a brand's marketing journey. But if you start early with that, you can really build out personas and profiles that will cater to a variety of different underrepresented audiences. And we all know that in 2025, we are intersectional in our identities. So people aren't just one thing, right? I'm not just Black, I'm not just Latina, I'm not just a woman, I'm a woman of color. And so there's lots of intersections. And as you're building out those customer segmentations early in the strategy for your business and your marketing, you will definitely save yourself the time down the road once you get to a more mature marketing stage.
I love that. I especially think, to your point, the advice of being inclusive early on, even in your customer targets and personas, could be really, really valuable. I always challenge my clients to think about the world that we live in from a retail standpoint and a digital standpoint. And I always say, hey, name a place, name a digital marketplace or a retail physical marketplace that you have shopped in recently that only had or contained one particular type of consumer. It was only Black men in there. There were only Asian females in there. There were only white males. Like there's not a place that exists in that context. And so your brands have to speak to inclusivity, which people sometimes kind of recoil and think, oh, maybe they're talking more of, this diversity kind of hot button topic. But the reality is we're just saying, look, dollars are green. And those dollars speak across multiple faces, multiple cultures, multiple identities. And if you want to scale your brand and grow, you're going to have to figure out a way to make sure your brand speaks to those inclusive audiences. So love that advice. All right. So we're wrapping up our rapid fire segment. Thank you, Devoreaux, for humoring us with that quick segment. And I think you really did give us some insight and some great answers on who you are. So let's talk a little bit more now about the core topic that we came to talk about today. And I really am looking forward to your expertise as we get into the topic of diversity and inclusive marketing.
Awesome. Really looking forward to it.
All right, so look, let's start with the basics. Now, I know, there is a lot of noise out there right now, and I want you to just start by just breaking down what is inclusive marketing versus diversity and diversity marketing, and how they differ, why it matters?
Absolutely. Well, they certainly matter. And so I really today want to talk about not just the morality of why things are a good idea because it's a feel good, but
Hmm.
also, really looking at the data, right? Looking at the numbers, looking at how things are trending with the future and looking at, the business case essentially, because business case is why we make the decisions we make. It's not necessarily just because we want to do something because it feels right or feels good. That's not sustainable. So when we think about diversity marketing and inclusive marketing, they are two different things, although I know that people use the terms interchangeably
Interchangeably.
as if they are synonyms, and they're
Yeah,
not. So
they
diversity
are not.
marketing is marketing that celebrates and targets one diversity dimension or one identity dimension that a consumer group shares. So when we think about examples of this, right? Like we have maybe a marketing campaign just for consumers who are
Hmm.
neurodivergent. We have a
Hmm.
marketing campaign just for a particular generation, like Gen
Hmm.
Z.
Yep.
And so having just one focus on a particular identity dimension is what diversity marketing is all about.
Yep.
Now, on the flip side of that, inclusive marketing is a little bit different. And that's really marketing that celebrates diversity in all forms. So when we think about what inclusion really means, it is this beautiful representation of a diverse group and also really being able to respect and celebrate that. So when
Hmm.
we think about inclusive marketing, that would be one campaign with a user experience, a customer experience that really includes people with disabilities, people from different age groups, people from different racial and ethnic minorities, and different body sizes and body shapes. It's really being able to celebrate the differences that we have within a large group. So thinking
Right.
about just the average people that you come across and connect with in a regular day, and being able to celebrate all diversity forms in one marketing campaign or advertisement.
I love that. I love that. I agree with you that the two seem to be misconstrued at times as synonyms. They aren't, right? And I love the explanation and the breakdown, and I want the audience to really make sure they heard that first piece definition, which is in diversity marketing, which is definitely necessary for certain brands and companies. It is a focus on one right dimension of that diversity. And one I can think of right now as a gentleman crossing the 50-yard line and headed into the back half of my life and the wonder years. I see AARP, marketing, and I see specific marketing across the restaurant and entertainment and dining industry that is focused and speaking to an older demographic specifically, right? Like, so that is in essence diversity marketing. However, inclusive marketing, right, is celebrating not just that one senior demographic, but everybody else that could be a potential user or follower of your product or your campaign. So I love the definition there. Now tell me this, because one of the things you tapped on, which I think people do lose a little sight on when they hear these topics, is what is the business case, right? Like, why are they talking about this? Like, this is the brand blueprint, and I thought this was business. What are we talking about? Okay, so the business case. Let's first talk about the business case for it, and then also, can you speak a little bit about or give some examples on companies or brands that you can recommend or point out that have potentially done that well, figured that piece out to, okay, hey, I'm using inclusive marketing in a way that literally justifies from a business case why I'm doing it.
Yeah. So first I'll say, most entrepreneurs, when they start a business,
Mhm.
they're birthing a brand into the world because they're
Mhm.
solving a problem that they themselves or someone in their immediate circle, family or friends, has a challenge and they want to solve it, right? So typically what we see in the small business world is that your business is an extension of you. It
Mhm.
really becomes a opportunity for you to mirror with authenticity who you are while you're building and sharing, your brand with your product or service. So why does this matter, right? Well, we all know that representation matters and it's important, and we are becoming increasingly informed as consumers. A lot of us don't really realize the power that we have in the wallets that we hold. Where we are spending money is supporting organizations with their mission, their vision, all of the initiatives that they have. And so, this is something that I think a lot of us don't necessarily realize. When we are spending money, we are endorsing a brand. We are supporting them beyond just buying a product or a service for our own consumption, right? It's really being able to advance someone else's mission. So let's unpack that for a second, because a lot of us are probably spending money with brands that don't align with our own values, right? When we think about the values that we have based on different issues that matter, that are relevant in the world we are in, political issues, environmental issues, there are a lot of brands that frankly have probably been lobbying against some of the values that you have. And we are increasingly informed. There's a really cool website called Goods Unite Us, and it's a tool to help you align your spending with your values. People are doing research and really trying to understand what brands stand for. And I'll tell you, in particular, the Gen Z segment of the population, which is growing, it's fast growing. They will soon have so much more buying power than they have now as they're getting older, starting their careers, starting to generate that income and really have that discretionary income to spend. This is a segment that really is very intentional with how they're spending their money. Representation matters. We all want to see ourselves reflected. And so what is the business case? Well, the business case is really around that buying power, right? We know what the numbers look like. We know that the fastest growing segment is people of color. We know the statistics. We know the numbers of what it's going to look like in the United States, how people of color collectively will be larger than white groups. So we know that people of color is going to be the majority very soon. We also know the buying power, right? So when we think about the fact that the buying power of minority groups in the US was 4.2 trillion with a T in 2020 and is projected to reach 7 again trillion with a T in 2025, and that's from Insider Intelligence. We're looking at the data, we're looking at the facts, and if people are spending this money, you want them to spend their money with you. So really is important to be intentional, not with just how you are promoting a product or a service, but how you're even creating that customer experience to really be inclusive in how you are delivering that so that you can capture as much value and as much revenue for your brand as possible.
Yeah, I love that. I think the one thing that I really want people to focus on in that answer is the business case is real. You gave a number, trillions, right? But even if you break it down to your local market, your city, your environment that you are currently trying to put your product in, you will typically find that growth in that category or subcategory is being driven by largely a minority slash other than category, because what we're seeing in this economy right now are areas in which there is growth and there are innovation happening is coming from small businesses, startups, and brands that are looking at kind of the status quo and saying, hey, there's a different way to do this. There's a different way to reach this audience. There's a different way to solve this problem. The challenge, though, is carving your market share out in that reality. And that's why inclusive marketing matters, because it expands your available audience, right? And I think people need to really understand that people will engage with something that they see themselves in. So if I see myself, or I believe that I am a user of that product or a potential target of that service, and I feel like it is speaking to me because I see something in it that speaks to me, and maybe not is speaking to me from a cultural standpoint, maybe it's speaking to me from a social economic standpoint, maybe it's speaking to me from a geography standpoint, but it is speaking to me in a way that is letting me know that product is a relevant choice in my consideration set. right? So Deborah, take that one step further. If you think about the bottom line, right, and where people really at the end of the day make their decisions on, which is taking the dollars to the bank, where should business owners, founders, and brands focus on making sure they have inclusive marketing kind of figured out? Because I think that knee-jerk reaction in a lot of cases is, let me just do the rainbow coalition version of a commercial or a social media ad. If I just get a black person and a white person and a Hispanic and an Asian, then I've checked all the boxes. I've done inclusive marketing, right? I'm good, right?
Yeah, so I think what typically happens with brands when they first really explore the world of diversity marketing and inclusive marketing is, let me just put out one ad campaign. But as I stated before, consumers are much more informed now, and especially millennials and Gen Z are taking the time to do research comparing you and your competitor before making a buying decision.
Wow, that was a really important point. Can we hear that again?
As I stated before, consumers are much more informed now, and especially millennials and Gen Z are taking the time to do research comparing you and your competitor before making a buying decision.
Mm-hmm.
That means they're looking at your website, they're looking at your social media, they're cross-referencing, does it match? They're looking at who is in leadership on the leadership team, who are those senior executives, what do they look like, who are they? And reading press releases, looking at things on the news, there's a lot more time being spent by consumers before they just buy something off the shelf, unless they're just buying something based on price, and at which case they're just going to buy whatever they can get, which they would probably just buy like store brand at Walmart.
Which means if you're a business owner in that space, you're not marketing anyway, right? Like if you're just driven on price, you're not spending extra dollars to try to be inclusive in any way because you're only selling on price point. So I agree with you. It's so necessary. Now, can you take it one step further and talk a little bit about because the space now is really changing dynamically in the sense that there is much more do-it-yourself abilities out there or capabilities out there for brands, right? Like you can go on Canva, you have AI now, you can create your own ads, create your own visual content. And that scares me to a degree because there are a lot of people out there creating content, creating in their minds commercials and ads, and have no formal training, have no exposure to any of these principles. And so one of our passion points here on the show is to try to educate people in a very straight and direct way so they don't go out and make the classic, hey, AI, could you just make me a quick inclusive commercial for my brand, and end up with something that is really non-authentic. So talk to us about some practical ways that brands and founders can actually infuse inclusive marketing strategies into their businesses and brands.
Yeah, let's double click on the word strategy because that's really where it starts, right? So you have a strategy for the overall company, for the business, and then you have a marketing strategy. And this is something I do with clients on the day-to-day as a fractional CMO. This is really, my bread and butter. It's what gets me excited in the morning. And the strategy with marketing, specifically inclusive marketing, is that it does not extend to just your advertising campaigns and your collateral, like your website. It's so much more than that. As I said before, it matters about the representation of the leadership team. And so there's a lot of different factors there. Now, when it comes to running a small business, the small businesses that are the most successful are able to really leverage the expertise and the zones of genius that we all collectively have in the world, right? So this is not a podcast episode about accounting, but I would advise every business owner who's listening to the sound of my voice to not do their own accounting unless they have the credentials, the schooling, the training. You've already, got
in the same category of practicing medicine on yourself. Like
you understand the tax laws because they do change, if not every year, certainly with every administration. And so, this is really a great area and a great opportunity at the beginning of the year. You're setting your vision for the organization. What do you want to do with the brand? What's new? What's different? What pivots to make? And really making that investment in getting expertise from a subject matter expert in the areas that you don't know.
Yep.
You're running the business, you're running the operations in the day to day. That does not mean you need to be in the weeds of building out the supply chain or the accounting or your marketing. This is really a great opportunity for you to decide your priorities for the year and go out and get that help. So that's the first thing I'll say. I don't want to encourage people to DIY it, because here's what's happening with AI. AI is a hot topic. It's shiny, it's sexy, it's new. Everybody wants to do it with everything. And I think we are really jumping the gun. AI, first of all, to my knowledge, does not have regulations. We do not have any ethical boundaries. We don't have any regulation. And the majority of AI products are created by heterosexual white men, which means when we have people feeding it data and it's learning what inclusive marketing is, it may not absolutely be accurate or authentic, and it may not be something that you want to trust sharing and promoting. Now, you can certainly do testing, but you don't necessarily want to just click a few buttons and let things run without having a sense of really being able to control what is being shared and promoted on behalf of your brand.
Whoa, we need to hear that one more time.
The majority of AI products are created by heterosexual white men, which means when we have people feeding it data and it's learning what inclusive marketing is, it may not absolutely be accurate or authentic, and it may not be something that you want to trust sharing and promoting. Now, you can certainly do testing, but you don't necessarily want to just click a few buttons and let things run without having a sense of really being able to control what is being shared and promoted on behalf of your brand. That's a really fast way for you to tarnish the reputation of your brand and hurt the integrity of the brand and what it stands for. So, I don't want to encourage people to do too much with AI, just set it and forget it. You really have to have a lot of regulation, a lot of control over what's being used. It can help you to be more efficient, but there's a lot of risk with that right now, because we are still very early in the world of AI as things are starting to roll out. So really thinking about, how can you be inclusive with your marketing? It's going to be specific to every brand, just based on the product or service that you have to offer. Really looking at the strategy, making sure that there's a checklist to do an audit and see, who's missing, what is not being considered. How does what I have to offer, my product or service, affect people in their day-to-day life based on their life stage, based on their marital status, based on their body shape or body size? These are questions that a lot of brands are not thinking about, even in the product development phase. So, as I said, again, it's really not just an advertisement or a social media post or a website page. It goes much deeper than that, with even the product development aspect of what you have to offer consumers in the general market.
Oh, I love that. The funny thing is, when you think about some of um, the good examples of using inclusive marketing to reach your community and really engage your audience, and then you compare those to some of the bad cases and examples, the clear kind of line of demarcation seems to me to be the authenticity of the content, right? And back to my point about the rainbow coalition approach, we in the call it underrepresented community across multiple cultures, multiple colors, have always been a bit sensitive and wary of the brand that just has the rainbow coalition effect. And so I love what you said about it's different for every brand. And so for brand owners and founders and leaders, I would say first start from the beginning and work your way backwards, meaning you have the data to tell you who you're likely missing from an inclusivity standpoint. And the reason I know you have the data is because you likely have the ability to know who you're not selling to just by simply looking at who you are selling to. And so if you just take a quick double click on, hey, who am I selling to? And then go back and look at your marketing plan and your product offering and ask yourself, is that who we thought we would be selling to? And if there's an audience or two missing in that crowd, it likely is indicating that you have missed somewhere in the process some inclusivity. And I'll give a perfect of quick examples. I think some of the industries like fashion, very easy to understand inclusivity because they get it in a way that is very visual. They know their clothing, a fashion designer knows their article of clothing is likely going to be worn more than just by just one type of person. And so they do a fairly decent job once they get off the runway, obviously, and those body shapes. But once they get out into the general market, they get the fact that those fashion brands and items have to appeal to a broader audience. But it gets a bit more difficult when you think about technology based items, app based items, services. And so you have to start with the data you have. This is not meant to say just go out in the world and try to sell your product or brand to anybody and everybody. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying, though, is if you have a target market that includes multiple races, multiple lifestyle types, multiple socioeconomic types, then your advertising, your marketing, and your overall approach to engaging your consumers should also reflect that. And so I think one of the things that we've seen happen quite a bit over the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, to the point on AI, is that people are becoming a bit more equipped with, call it data / targeting information to better understand who their consumer may be. So if there is an area, I would advise our viewers and listeners to use AI on, which is helping you conduct and create the right surveys. So you can survey your audience and find out where you may be missing the boat in terms of inclusivity. And then secondarily, I think you can also use AI to help you understand the metrics and the key metrics that you need to measure. And so with that question, Devoreaux, I would actually toss that to you and say, what are some of the key metrics that brand owners should be thinking about when it comes to inclusive marketing?
Yeah, well, before I answer that, I'll just give a quick example as well. So, really thinking about, a service-based business. So, I'm working with a client now who has a membership, sort of like a professional development, ongoing training membership, and she really focuses on women of color. So,
Hmm.
obviously, being inclusive and true to her mission, there's no white women on the website, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
here's where it gets interesting. So when we think about women of color, that doesn't just mean let me find pictures with different shades of brown. We're
Right.
also thinking about, the different intersections. So
Correct.
there's a really big Muslim community within
Hmm.
communities of color. And so it's
Hmm.
important to have that reflected. So that's a really good example how things are not just on one level or either or in a binary type of fashion. And there's, a lot of nuance to it to really have that alignment back to the mission. So I definitely want to call that out because inclusive marketing doesn't mean let's just go after everyone. Let's go after everyone within the mission that makes sense for the business, which is why it always starts with strategy. Strategy
That's
has to
great.
come first.
Hey, Eloise, rewind that.
Inclusive marketing doesn't mean let's just go after everyone. Let's go after everyone within the mission that makes sense for the business, which is why it always starts with strategy. Strategy
That's
has to
great.
come first. So, in terms of the metrics, I think there's a lot that can be said around leveraging AI and really just implementing focus groups and getting consumer feedback and consumer engagement to really get a better understanding because people won't lie. I read reviews about products, and that's one of the things that can really help a brand to build up its reputation is through having positive reviews and positive feedback. But if you're not incorporating the feedback to really make things better over time, then it's really a missed opportunity. So certainly you want to be able to get an understanding from every stage in the buyer journey from consumers that have already been through the buyer journey with you, happy customers, maybe dissatisfied customers or clients, and really get some understanding around, what have been areas that were done really well, what were areas that could have been improved, and how and why, and what did they think about before they made a purchase decision, comparing you with another competitor or two within your industry, what sparked them or motivated them to buy from you. It's even helpful to understand what motivated someone to buy from a competitor within your
Yep.
industry to really get some advantage
Yeah.
around
Great advice. Yep.
continuously improve. And this is an exercise that you should do at least once a year, to
Mhm.
take an inventory and do an audit of your consumer buyer journey and also just get that customer feedback. Clients and customers are going to tell you, especially if you are asking them, what is the feedback that you can share for us to make things better for not only you, but for others that are coming in the future that we can serve with our product or service. So it's really an ongoing exercise. And I think that's the hardest challenge that small business owners face when it comes to keeping their head above water in the world of marketing. It doesn't stop, y'all.
Yep.
It does
Yep.
not end.
Yep.
It starts and it keeps going. I call it the
Yep.
marketing machine. But that is really one very easy way for small businesses to end up drowning because they just can't keep up, which goes back to the point earlier around having a team, delegating, hiring that expertise, because it really is not all on you as the owner of the business.
Yep. Yep. And Devereaux, to that point, you are a provider of some of those services. Talk a little bit about how you work with and how a small brand owner or founder should think about working with a consultant like you, because I get a lot of questions from clients who come in and say, "Hey, Dana, I wish I would have talked to you before, but I met this consultant a couple of years ago. They gave me this pitch on, how they were going to turn my marketing around and increase my, leads or increase my sales by X%. It didn't happen. And I didn't really understand what I should have been asking or what I should have been looking for. So can you, tell me what to do?" So similarly, can you advise our viewers and listeners, what are some key things to expect, look for when they're working with a consultant like you? And then secondarily, what are some of the key outcomes that consultants can deliver, to your point, given the fact that, hey, some of these founders only got one set of hands and one set of eyes, right, to really work during their daily basis. And so having an extra set can really be helpful at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's always important to really know before you start, quote unquote, shopping around what you need. So you
Hmm.
don't necessarily have to know, I need help with my email campaigns because I'm not getting clicks. You don't have to know that level of detail, but you at least have to know what it is you need, what problem you initially are trying to solve for. Are you trying to increase awareness? Are you trying to get your messaging right? Are you trying to initially launch? Are you trying to
Hmm.
rebrand? What is
Hmm.
that initial factor that's
Hmm.
motivating you to seek out help? And as you're looking at different options, it's really important to talk to somebody. Don't just sign up for a program or a course or just buy something without really having that initial conversation, even if it's just 15, 20 minutes to get a vibe check.
Yeah.
They get you? Do you align? Do you have a good rapport with someone? Because a lot of times, you really want someone to help support your brand who just gets it. They get the vision, they are bought into it, they understand there's some alignment, and even potentially them being, knowledgeable enough about the product, service, or offering that they could even be your ideal client in one of the segments that you have, just so that there's that alignment. Trying to teach someone why this is so important is really, trying to pull them along on a journey that you don't have to beg the right person who's the right fit for supporting your brand. So you can expect, a variety of different things from additional marketing support, whether it's more awareness, more website to your storefront, to your more traffic to your website, more traffic to your storefront, higher revenue from sales, customer segmentation to really expand that audience reach of exactly who you are reaching. And you can even start refining not only the customer journey, but also the product experience and what that product or service offering has to offer. So there's just a lot of different benefits and a lot of different ways that things can be revived. What's measured gets improved. And so there's always an opportunity to take measurements in every stage of your marketing. What I will say is that when I work with clients as a fractional CMO, I always start with strategy. Even if a client comes to me and already has a strategy,
I was just going to ask you, where do you start?
Done, right?
Yep.
And so it could be 5 years ago. It could be, I don't have a strategy, but this is what I put together from an AI prompt. And so we always start with strategy because chances are things will change. And that's another thing I'd encourage every small business owner to give yourself grace, because there will be a pivot at some point in your journey and in your evolution.
I love that.
Just the understanding that change and pivots will happen, they will come. And if they haven't happened yet, they will happen. And you can't be frustrated with that. That's just part of the process.
Can we hear that again?
I'd encourage every small business owner to give yourself grace, because there will be a pivot at some point in your journey and in your evolution.
I love that.
The understanding that change and pivots will happen, they will come. And if they haven't happened yet, they will happen. And you can't be frustrated with that. That's just part of the process. Think about these really large brands like Amazon, right? Have they always been an online storefront that's selling products from all over the world? No, they started as a bookstore. And so when small brands have these expectations that they're just going to start on one path and stay on that path for the whole time they're in business successfully, that's really false advertising, if you will. So definitely don't have the wrong expectations about the journey of being a business owner.
I love that. And I was going to ask, but you answered it before I could, which is, when in the process do you want to bring a CMO or a marketing consultant in? And you answered the question before I could, which is at the beginning, folks. Like, from a strategic standpoint, even if you come to us after the fact, we are going to still start with the strategy. It is essentially, like I tell people all the time, you bring in a car to a mechanic. I'm a mechanic. I can't start working on your business if you self-diagnose. Nobody drives their car into a mechanic and goes, yo, my fourth cylinder is off, and I think that's what I need to get tuned up. So just go in there and do that. Don't fix anything else. Like, no. And that's similar to how I think, unfortunately, founders approach consultants, not just in the CMO space, but the CFO space, the COO space, etc. Fractional consultants are here to help you move your business forward. But in many cases, most of us have to get a picture or a snapshot of what happened before you got to us, so we can then help you move forward. So if you don't want to engage in the strategic part, and you just want an executional consultant, you're probably not going to get the positive results that you're looking for. So, Devoreaux, thank you for that advice, because I really appreciate that. And again, for my listeners and followers, make sure you look up Devoreaux. We will have her information available on the brandblueprint.biz. As usual, under her profile will be links to contact her directly, so you can learn more about how she could potentially help you and your inclusive marketing. So that being said, we're coming to the end of the interview, Devoreaux. But before we go, I would love to have you just tell the audience a little bit more about what you're working on, what you have going on in 2025, and how they can reach out to you and follow you on the social media front.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Dana, and shout out to any Spellhouse listeners. We are Spellhouse here representing today. So I just wanted to share that for really anybody in the HBCU family. And if you are not HBCU family, we still send you love.
Got love for you. We still got love for you. If you went to a PWI or no WI, we still got love for you.
Absolutely. This is all about inclusion. So just wanted to give that shout out. So I absolutely am so passionate about really helping lifestyle brands. My focus right now is on brands that offer products, services, and experiences. So hotels, travel, beauty, fashion, restaurants, art galleries, and spas, just to name a few. And as a fractional CMO, I really specialize in helping to come and really look at the strategy, if there is none, really being able to build that up and help a brand successfully navigate seasons of change. Whether it's a launch, a rebrand, a merger and acquisition, or a pivot, it's always a really fun time. And it's really common that brands get tripped up during seasons of change without having that extra support. And so that's what I specialize in at my firm, Revelant. The best place to find me is on LinkedIn or on my website, which is berevelant.com.
I love that. And we will be hearing more from Devoreaux and Be Relevant. We will be working with them to bring more content to you throughout 2025. This isn't the last time you will see her on the Brand Blueprint. You have been a fantastic guest today, and I have so many more questions and so more things I would love to talk to you about. But I know as a consultant like me, you got to get that money. And so I can't keep you on podcasts for 2 or 3 hours a day. Even if I could, I would, but I know I got to let you go. But before I do want to wrap up by just letting you, just as a last comment to the crowd, is just give your last piece of advice on, for anybody starting off in the space, how they should think about inclusive marketing and why it's important.
Yeah, so my last words of wisdom, pearls of wisdom, are really around being able to think intentionally about what is best in alignment for the vision for your organization. I know that we are in a time where a lot of people are saying that DEI is dead. It's not important. It's stupid. It's a waste of time. And that is incorrect. We can look at the data. We can look at the segments of the population that are growing. We can look at the revenue being spent with the buying power. And we certainly understand that when people feel as though they are not included or not welcomed, that those consumers will go somewhere else. And you do not want your brand to be one that used an AI tool and sent out a campaign and offended, and now you're canceled. So just really be intentional with your vision, with all of the marketing that you are doing, with your campaigns, with your messaging. Just have that level of intention and make sure there's alignment back to the vision you have for your organization. Because despite all of the noise and all of the clutter, inclusive marketing is here and it's here to stay. It's going to show up in a lot of different ways, and you want to be a part of that. You want your business to get a slice of the large trillions being spent in this pie within the marketplace. So that would be my advice to you today.
That's right. Trillions, not billions, not millions, trillions. And you do want to play a part in that. I love it. Devoreaux, thank you for that advice. And hopefully our listeners will be reaching out to you directly soon to help them move their marketing efforts along. And I want to make sure that I double click on that to just say again, you need to start at the strategy point and bring somebody like Devoreaux into your business or operation when you are actually thinking through the strategy of your marketing plan, not the simple parts of executing your marketing plan. And so with that, once again, I say thanks for tuning in to another great episode of the Brand Blueprint podcast. As always, you can find additional and exclusive content on our website at thebrandblueprint.biz, not .com, because we're about that biz. And also make sure you follow us on all of our favorite social media platforms and podcast platforms. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon. You can find us everywhere you need us to be. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next on the Brand Blueprint podcast. Have a great one. Thanks for joining us on the Brand Blueprint journey. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms to stay updated. Watch the full episodes on our YouTube channel for an in-depth experience. Don't forget to subscribe to our website at thebrandblueprint.biz for exclusive content and materials. We're everywhere you need us to be.